So today I'm glad to be joined again with Dr. Picart, Dr. Carolyn Picart, and just a little bit of a short bio before we get into her company and her website about kinesthetics in sport and dance. Dr. Carolyn Picart is a scholar attorney, philosopher, dance sport athlete, and retired professor who has published over 20 peer-reviewed scholarly books and numerous articles and book chapters in law, philosophy, film, criminology, sociology, and communications. She also founded Kinesthetics LLC, which we'll be talking about, a fine art and ballroom dance company. She was the 2006 U.S. Dancesport Open Competition champion in cabaret slash theater arts, which is a mix of ballroom, ballet, and gymnastics. So after 21 years as a professor, teaching across the Philippines, South Korea, and various parts of the US, she proceeded to law school and graduated with honors with a joint JD and MA in 2013. And she began her own ballroom dance and fine arts company, Kinesthetics LLC, in 2005. From '02 to '08, she scripted, directed, and performed in Florida State University's Ford TV's Global Gatherings, a TV show that spotlighted dance and culture. She was also invited to judge as a judge to the Azalea International Folk Fair's World Folk Dance Competition, Georgia's official international festival. Her radio show, Dr. Carolyn or Carol Caroline Picard Show, was picked up and excerpted from in form by 56 national and international affiliates in 9 months. So the website that she has, in addition to CarolineKPicard.com, or CarolineKPicard.com, she also has kinesthetics as or kinesthetic sport as art.com. That's kinesthetics sport as art.com, which we'll be talking about. So welcome. And by the way, from the link to her book that we'll be talking about, from ballroom to dance sport, I'm going to put that link in the description below. So you can check that out, or even just go to Amazon and just do a search for Caroline Picard, and all of her books will probably pop up. So welcome, Dr. Picard. So first of all, can you describe what Kinesthetics LLC is?
So, kinesthetics is the motto for art, health, and life, which animates my company, which is partially a ballroom dance and in specific cabaret dancing company, where cabaret dancing is a mix of ballroom, ballet, and gymnastics, as you mentioned, as well as a fine art company. So, for the fine art component, I produce mainly oil paintings, mixed media paintings, as well as fine point pen and ink sketches. And these have been exhibited and sold both nationally and internationally, as I have competed and performed both nationally and internationally as well.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I was going to ask. Can you tell us like specifics about the competitions that you entered? Because I know that you won, like I mentioned, like the championship, but I know that you said you finished on your site. It says you finished second a couple times too, but on your way up to finally becoming champion, right?
Right. I have been dancing, performing, competing in ballrooms since 1991. I started in Cambridge, England, actually. Although the tradition in which I was trained was the American tradition, not the European tradition. And from there, I went to Seoul, South Korea, where I organized an international ballroom dance club. And from there, came to the US and have been competing mainly in Fred Astaire and Arthur Murray competitions and won a host of medals, so gold, silver, bronze, different colors. And then I got spotted by um, a world champion who had turned into a coach for professional athletes, and he asked whether I might be interested in competing and in pairing with a professional dancer. Of course, I immediately said yes, and after 3 to 4 months of intensive training, I won second place with my first dance sport athlete partner. And then from basically from 2005 to a part of 2006, so for almost 2 years, I was consistently ranked second nationally and internationally at the cabaret division pro-am section. Then in 2006, I was fortunate enough to win the gold medal in the 2006 US Open Dancesport Championship in the cabaret division, and also won in the same division at the Fred Astaire Nationals for several golds. Is that sufficient?
Right, right. And was your partner Eric Luna, right?
Eric Luna was the partner I won second place with in
Okay.
2005, and he was a world champion. And then in 2006, I was partnered with Darian Chancellor, who became a world champion when he won it with me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I was going to ask later on, I'll ask about some of your specific paintings, but I know that one of them is it's a great one. It's like Champions in the Making. Is that based on like on your journey?
right. I did do a lot of both dance poses and dance sport uh, competition paintings, which were inspired partially by the fellow competitors that I was meeting and collaborating with during the numerous dance camps or dance competitions. But they were also inspired by my personal experiences partnering and competing with different professional athletes.
Right. And as I understand too, from reading more about this, the National International or Nations International Children's Educational Fund, UNICEF, chose one of your artworks to be featured on its prints.
Right, that was in 1992 when I was in Seoul, South Korea. They invited me to submit an artwork that would be used as an art motif on one of their art postcards, which was sold for fundraising. So I was basically giving up all the rights associated with that particular artwork in terms of reproduction, and I gladly gave it to UNICEF.
Right.
1992 was also the year in which I had a solo art exhibit sponsored by the Philippine Embassy in Seoul, South Korea.
Okay. And I should mention that on the site, kinesthetics as sport.com, or did I say that right? Right? Let me go back here. Oh, yeah,
Aestheticssportasart.com.
yeah. You can see all kinds of especially under the portfolio, you can see all kinds of examples. Under like portraits, you have golf landscapes, which I'm going to ask you about coming up. But you also have fantasy, which is awesome too. And then, okay, dance poses. I wanted to ask about this because I don't really know anything about being a judge with these dance competitions. And but by the way, on the main site, if you scroll down, you have an example of like a YouTube video of one of your contests. That's pretty cool to watch. I'll ask you more about that coming up too. But in terms of like dance poses, is that something that, because I know that in like gymnastics, I know that the types of um, routines that they do, like the types of exercises that they perform, whatever, that makes a huge impression on the judges. Is it the same thing with dance poses? Like, are there dance poses that really impress the judges? Those
Well,
specific.
the closest analog you can have to ballroom dance as a potential Olympic sport is really ice dancing,
Oh,
where
okay.
there are familiar moves or routines, and there are certain expectations regarding the technique of manifesting these poses. But there's also a form of artistry that is difficult to calibrate, that is also part of the judging process.
Uh-huh. So just in general, like growing up, I mean, I guess like what I'm asking is, what kind of inspired you to write the book? Even, I mean, did you start, obviously you probably started performing before you wrote the book, correct? And what kind of inspired you to write that book from ballroom to dance sport?
So the book was a spontaneous outflow of my dual positionality as an experienced dancer, but also as a philosopher and at that time a professor. So in other interviews, we've talked about the outsider perspective, which I discussed in my book. Inside Notes from the Outside. So it's basically the same theoretical framework, but this time is applied to the cultural and political realms of dance and academia.
Okay, another question that people might ask, like if you were to just sum up, like what is the book principally about? Is it about, like what I mean by that is it just about your experiences, or is it also kind of an educational, like teaching book, how like about dancing and educating people who might be new to it? Or is it kind of a combination of both, your experiences in doing it and then also educating people on how to do it?
That's a good synopsis of it. Technically, the book has three parts, and the title of the book doesn't really capture the breadth that the book has. So the first part is an autoethnographic, phenomenological, or philosophical exploration of my experiences as a dancer. So how I pose my body to fit the choreography and the demands and expectations that each different art form and dance form requires. And as I shift from leading to following, so it's an exploration of the body in dance and the various cultural and political prisms through which movement is movement and its balance counterpoint, stillness, of course, is both performed or staged as well as received. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is a cinematic exploration of ballroom dance in film. So it starts with the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers tradition and examines more recent films like Dirty Dancing and Dirty Dancing Havana Nights, uh, Tango and Tango Lesson, Strictly Ballroom, and Shall We Dance, for example, or Dance with Me. So it goes through a host of different films and tracks how the Fred Astaire Ginger Rogers tradition has been both carried on, but at the same time rebelled against by these different, more contemporary films about ballroom dance. Then the third aspect is really what the title captures. So it tries to describe the transformation of ballroom dance from its recreational, artistic, performance to becoming a regulated sport and an aspiring Olympic sport. In fact, it was a demonstration sport in 1998, but it hasn't progressed past that, as far as I know, anyway.
Right. I mean, you kind of explained this because I was going to ask about like what was the distinctive approach that you take in the book and compared to maybe some other books, but you kind of explained that, and especially the cinematic aspect. I mean, I don't know, have you ever gotten into tap dancing, and do you talk about like Ann Miller back
I'm afraid that's a little beyond ballroom.
Yeah.
But thank you for that input. Yes.
So, so you kind of answered this as well, but to a degree, but who would be the target audience for of this for this book from ballroom to dance sport?
So there are two general types of readers. The first would be a general reader who's simply quite curious about what lies beyond the spotlight and the sparkly costumes. Then the second one would be a scholarly reader who would be interested in, for example, performance studies, dance history, gender critique as well as visual culture. So, more generally described scholars or students who are interested in dance, in performance studies, in film and media studies, in cultural studies, as well as in philosophy and in specific in aesthetics and phenomenology.
Right. So it does have kind of an eclectic audience, I would
Yes,
say.
it does. And I forgot to include communication studies as well.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, definitely.
autoethnography is in communication studies, and so are cultural studies as well. It's part of it.
Yeah. Looking at, like I just did some research on ballroom dancing and some different types. Would you say that like because there's different like Philippine and Korean folk dance as well as Hawaiian dancing, do some of these things overlap or they have distinct differences, would you say?
Yes, you're pointing out my background, which is a little bit eclectic. In addition to 16 years as a ballerina, I had training in Philippine folk dance, Korean folk dance, as well as Hawaiian dancing. Now, these configure the body differently from ballroom, although there are some crossover. In other words, some things in the way the body is trained moves across the different cultural interfaces very well, but others don't. So, for example, in ballet, ballerinas are infamous for having a lot of natural turnout to their feet. And that is an advantage in the rhythm or the Latin dances, where um, the heel ball change and the alternate straight and bent knees are better executed with some degree of turnout. But then in the smooth or standard dances, you you have to keep your feet level as much as possible and avoid turnout. So the training as a ballerina is a disadvantage for that. But for the upper body, with the movement of the arms and the posture and general carriage, much of that carries over beautifully from ballet. So for Hawaiian dancing, some of it with the hip movement carries over as well because you're supposed to not only alternately bend and straighten your knees in the American tradition, but you're also supposed to do figure eights with your hips as you execute, for example, the cha-cha or the samba or the mambo. So
Right.
the different cultural traditions interface to different extents.
So for somebody that's maybe thinking about starting out, that's thinking about starting ballroom dancing, is there a specific type of dance to learn? For example, like the waltz, the foxtrot, salsa, or something like that? Or does it just kind of all flow together?
Actually, there are two different traditions of ballroom. One is the European style or tradition. The second is the American style or tradition. And within both, you have two different classes of dances. You have the standard or smooth dances, and you have the rhythm or Latin dances. Let me first distinguish the two different types of dances so we have a better sense for what is generally taught for a beginning class. So, for the standard or smooth dances, and this also gets into the discussion of how the dancing body is positioned as both a cultural and political site. It is gendered, race, class, nationalized, sexualized in its performance of dance. Now, in the smooth or standard dances, the men usually wear tuxedos or tails and coats, and the women wear very long gowns, elegant and beautiful. And in the standard dances, they have fabrics that flow from their arms so that you have that swirling effect to accentuate their movements. Now, standard or smooth dances are raised as whitened. They come from a more European tradition and they are classed as privileged. Now, for the rhythm or Hispanic dances, the authentic look is a native quote unquote look. So, dance scholars have pointed out the practice of professional dancers of putting on brown face or going to tanning salons in order to have the tanned look, which is the preferred look. Now, if for the smooth or standard dances, you have clothing that covers the body, in the rhythm or Latin dances, you have as little as possible that you shake as much as possible. And the resulting racing of it is, of course, it is non-white. And in terms of the gender dynamics, whereas for the smooth or standard dances, there seems to be a very clear leader-follower power differential. And the woman never breaks away from the close position, the embrace position for the the standard dances. For the smooth dances, because it's in the American tradition, the woman is allowed to break away and they can dance side by side because that's the way Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers danced. So there's a little bit more freedom for the woman in the smooth tradition. Now, under the Latin or rhythm traditions, there seems to be even more freedom and autonomy for the woman or the follower because she's allowed to break away and, in some instances, even take a position of standing over her partner. So she seems more dominant in some poses. But then that comes at a very high price because she's also at the same time extremely sexualized and eroticized, which is not true of the standard or smooth dances. So those are the two different styles of dancing. Now, generally in an introductory ballroom class, and I just taught one, with my church's family ballroom dance, where daddies dance with their daughters and mothers dance with their sons. You usually start with either the waltz or the foxtrot for the smooth dances. And then because it is easy for the rhythm or Latin dances, you do something like the merengue or the salsa.
Okay. That is interesting actually. Like because one of the questions I was that I had that I wrote down here as well is that to perfect any routine, like let's get away from the beginners part. I mean, obviously it takes a lot of practice, but for you, like a professional dancer, how long? Because like I'm just looking at that on your homepage, that video. And like, how long does it take to perfect that? Because obviously it's not spontaneous. You guys have practiced it, and you know what movements to come. You can anticipate like what you need to do next and everything. Does that take I mean, how much time does that take?
Well, when I was at my peak, I would be working out for about 3 to 4 hours in the gym, doing various exercises, lifting weights, doing aerobic exercises, um, engaging in different dance classes, other traditions of dancing, line dancing, for example, and
Right.
then about 2 hours of partner dancing, where I would do the lifts and the drops and the routines. So it takes a while. You can have something ready for high level competition in about 3 months with consistent work. But usually you're at your best if you practice it for about a year. So you project a year ahead when you
Right.
start doing your routines.
Right. That's a lot of time. I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the 10,000 hour rule, which Malcolm Gladwell talks about a little bit, but it actually came before him that it really takes, I mean, so maybe that's an exaggeration and sometimes, but it takes a long time to get things into perfection. But um, let me switch the subject back to painting. With your painting, because you have a lot of them, and I know that a lot of them are for sale, by the way. How long does it take you to do like one of those paintings? Because you have a lot of them.
Yeah, and the company features not only original fine art, but also limited edition prints, as well as art postcards. So there are less expensive options as well, or more budget-friendly options. Now, as to time, I really don't pay attention to that because it's usually the subject matter that dictates how long it takes. So fine point pen and ink sketches, for example, have their own rhythm versus oil painting where you can slather paint across a huge canvas. So the both the medium, the technique, the subject matter all interact in a way that eventually gives birth to an art form. But
Right,
as how long it takes however long it takes.
right, right. Because I wanted to ask you a little bit, because I especially because I'm a huge golfer, and one of my friends, by the way, he's my golf pro, and also we've written some screenplays together. Not all of them are about golf, but he also is a painter, and he's painted a lot of golf paintings. So I just want to ask, out of curiosity, are you yourself a golfer, or did you just?
The golf paintings began mainly because my first husband was a, how do you call it, a college athlete, all-American golfer.
Yeah,
And he at one time requested me to do a golf painting. So I did one and I enjoyed it. And he liked it so much that I decided I should probably try to add that to the subject matter that I explore. And that's how that blossomed. And
right.
he did teach me some basic golf.
No,
I'm
because
much better at putting than driving.
yeah, what was funny is in my notes, I was going to say you should do the 17th at Sawgrass. And then I looked and you did. You should also consider the 18th because that is, and by the way, that course, Ponte Vedra, it's in Ponte Vedra Beach, which is by Jacksonville. That's a public course, meaning it's not a country club, so the public can play it. I want to do it sometime. It costs a lot of money, but it's still, the public can play it. And the 18th hole is even scarier because the water is like completely on the left and it's a hook. The fairway hooks to the right. So to follow the fairway, you have to start it way to the right and then draw it back in. Or some people, if they're feel dangerous enough, they'll actually start it out over the water and fade it back into the fairway. But in any case, that's a difficult hole. But I was going to say, you have the 12th at Augusta, which
Yeah.
Augusta is by all accounts the prettiest golf course in the world. But you have the 12th, or you have the 12th and the 13th. But you should also maybe consider doing the 11th because that would complete Amen Corner, what they call it, the 11th, 12th, and 13th. And also
That's good to know.
the bridges too. At the 12th, when they from the tee to
Yes.
the green, they go over these famous like arch bridges. It's a
Yeah.
classic image. Um, but
Yes.
I know that I just got to notice that we're running a little bit out of time, but I think we still have a few minutes left. I wanted
Okay.
to ask, and if we do have time, but I want to ask about a couple other paintings, but um, this you kind of touched on this, um, but strength training and I just look at athletes like Tom Brady, of course. He says that, and by the way, Tom Brady, I'm the biggest Tom Brady fan in the world because he played at Michigan. I'm from Michigan. I remember watching him in college and I knew he was going to be a great NFL quarterback, but he was like the sixth round pick, 199th pick, but then now he's the best player of all time. But so I've been a huge fan of his for years. And his one of the things that he talks about is being strong, like lifting weights, of course, but also pliability, like keeping the muscles, like he demonstrated this, like keeping the muscles long and soft because it's been shown by I guess strength trainers that keeping the muscles long and soft with stretching helps prevent muscles from tearing. So would you say that pliability also goes into being a good dancer?
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the animating principles of kinesthetics is this dynamic balance between motion and stillness. And what bridges the gap between motion and stillness is flow, so pliability.
Right,
That's certainly one of the features of the company.
right. Yeah, I agree. And I've learned that recently too, because I have a personal trainer and he really emphasizes flexibility before you start. And then also the same thing could be said of like Tiger Woods. Say what you will about him personally and all his legal trouble, but in terms of his workout routine, he says that before he starts lifting weights, he spends a good between 20 and maybe even up to 40 minutes just stretching, getting the muscles loose and relaxed. And so he does that before even lifting weights. So real quickly, I wanted to ask a couple more questions about your paintings. You have a couple.
Well, before you go
Oh,
ahead with that, I also wanted to add that I do yoga Pilates as well, which is both
yeah,
for strengthening as well as flexibility.
right. Because you also have a painting called Meditation, right? Which is
Yeah.
kind of linked to yoga in some way.
Yes, you could say that. Yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, you have a couple of paintings of a cat and cats. You have, and your point is, and it reminds me of my cat Hermione because not the way that it looks, she doesn't look like that, but the look that she gives kind of reminds me of some of the looks. And then also the kiss with the two cats kissing. Are those based on cats that you had, or just you just do that, grew that, or painted that randomly?
Well, the idea of it was based on cats that we had, but the actual execution of it was more theoretical.
Okay. Okay. Well, one last thing about the paintings. You have a couple paintings of Keith Sweat, and I'm just curious as where do those come from? Did you know him or did you meet him or
That's an excellent question. Those were commissioned works.
oh,
So
okay.
there was someone, a client wanted portraits of Keith Sweat, so I made
Gotcha.
some. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, it reminds me of like in the film industry, a lot of I mean, the majority of movies that you see in the theater are basically commissioned, if you will. They don't accept like new scripts from like random screenwriters. The studio will seek out a screenwriter and then hire them to write the script. Um, so I guess I'm done with the questions. I just wanted to say that in our future, maybe maybe not next time. I have an idea for that too that I'll tell you about. But maybe in the future we can talk about monsters, crime, and law because I know you've written a lot about that, and those are fascinating concepts that each of them is very interesting. So maybe we can talk about that. But I was going to say next time because I know you've written a lot about the Holocaust and Holocaust literature, Holocaust films, and so forth. Maybe we can do one of your books on that next time. And also, I don't know if you there was a movie that came out last year with Russell Crowe called Nuremberg. I don't know if
Hmm.
you saw it. It's an excellent movie.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean that would be like the latest, I guess, World War II movie. Not well, kind of related to the Holocaust, really.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
I don't know if you
Mhm.
saw that, but I don't know if it's out on DVD yet. But it's excellent. But maybe we can do that for next time.
Well, that sounds like a series of shows.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. I think it's probably best to spread them out, beginning with a focus on monsters, law, crime, and then probably a different interview on the Holocaust and film. So the Holocaust film source book, and then another podcast on what was the last item you wanted to discuss?
Oh, well, we could discuss Nuremberg. Well, we could t talk about the subject of Nuremberg, but also I was talking about the film.
Yeah,
And
so Holocaust films in general. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like Schindler's List. Also, there's one called The Gray Zone. I'm not sure if you ever saw that one. But yeah, and also there's one I'm drawing a blank on it. It was it's a kind of a short. It's like a 45-minute documentary. It's considered one of the best Holocaust. I'm sure that you would know what I'm talking. I just forget the name offhand. But it's like 45 minutes, but it's really really powerful. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, sure, we should do another interview, recorded interview on Holocaust films.
yeah, yeah. That'd be great.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yes. Well, anyways, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Yes, I adore talking to you and enjoy very much our exchanges.
Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Have a
okay.
great afternoon.
Yeah, you too. Bye bye.
Bye.